Some players hit a wall and just stand there, desperately hoping someone else will come along and open a door for them. Julian Alvarez finally found that person, and it was not his agent, Stecco or Laura. It was someone who knows Simeone better than absolutely anyone alive. Someone who with a single call managed to solve in minutes what had been completely unresolved for weeks. There are calls that change careers. This week, one of those calls happened. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe as we break down the most unexpected, shocking turn in this transfer market before anyone else, and share this with friends who love the drama of football. The striker arrived at Atletico de Madrid in the hot summer of 2024, €75 million, 5 seasons, the second most expensive signing in club history. It was the clearest sign that Diego Pablo Simeone considered that Julian was exactly the type of relentless player he needed for the next cycle of the red and white team. What followed justified that investment completely. He was precisely the star everyone expected at Atletico. Scoring crucial goals in big matches, relentless defensive sacrifice, and the rare versatility to play anywhere across the front line without losing any of his lethal edge. He was the exact type of player Simeone spent his career searching for. A player who offers so much more than numbers on a stat sheet, who never hides when a match gets gritty. But this summer, everything fractured. Barca, desperate for a clinical striker after Lewandowski left, quickly identified Julian as their absolute number one target. Deco, the club's sporting director, caught a flight to Madrid to meet with the players' camp. Behind closed doors, talks progressed fast. Hope grew in Barca, and once Julian heard what the Catalan giants were offering him, he made a massive decision that set off a chaotic chain reaction. Going public with his desire to leave was a cardinal sin at Atletico de Madrid. Gilmarin, who runs the club with the very same ruthless philosophy that Simeone demands on the pitch, shot back with absolute, bone-chilling clarity that left no room for interpretation. Julian Álvarez was absolutely not for sale, and Atletico had zero intention of negotiating the sudden departure of their most critical franchise player. If anyone wanted Julian, they would have to pay a massive release fee that Barca, crippled by the ongoing UEFA investigation, simply could not afford. And so the standoff began. Julian had hoped this mess would be sorted out quickly, but he soon began to realize that a smooth resolution was simply not coming. Barca, his dream destination, was refusing to take that final crucial step. Atletico did not want to sell, yet they looked at him with the deep discomfort of knowing they had a superstar who would rather be playing his football anywhere else. It is a toxic situation that happens behind closed doors more than fans realize, carrying a heavy psychological toll that very few outside the locker room can ever grasp. Julian, who is an emotional player who shines when he is happy, but deeply needs the right mental and tactical space to perform, started to buckle under that heavy pressure. Those closest to the Argentine described these past few weeks as the absolute hardest period he has ever lived through in his professional career. The friction with Simeone, which fractured the second Julian asked to leave, was painfully obvious to everyone during every single training session. There were cold stares, heavy silences, and the awkward friction of two strong men who respect each other, but find that respect nearly impossible to maintain on a daily basis. To survive this massive mental battlefield, Julian made a brave choice that speaks volumes about his personal maturity. He sought out professional psychological therapy, not because his form on the pitch had collapsed, but because he knew this crushing weight was simply too heavy to carry alone. The forward needed mental tools to navigate a crisis he could not control, struggling with a mental block that made driving into Valdebebas every morning absolute torture. Knowing he wanted to leave but was trapped there, he realized that without professional help, this toxic environment would destroy his career and his personal well-being. This was the quiet torment Julian Álvarez endured this week. Meanwhile, Barca, still keen but paralyzed by the looming UEFA investigation and a closing transfer window, refused to take that final decisive step. While Atletico, who knew perfectly well what was happening with their star, kept their firm no-sale stance with the quiet confidence of those who know that time is on their side. And while Julian, the player who had forced a transfer request, who had openly declared his desire for Barca, and who had caused a massive, suffocating rift at Atletico, just kept training. He turned up every single day. He tried desperately to hide his inner turmoil from the cameras and his teammates. Until this week, when he finally hit a complete breaking point. So he picked up his phone, not to call his representative, not to call Deco, or any of the usual power brokers who are supposed to handle these transfers. He dialed someone completely outside that circle, a person who shares a deep bond with him that goes far beyond football, a fellow Argentine who knows the exact, agonizing pain of being trapped at a club when your heart and mind are already somewhere else entirely, and who faced a similar crisis years ago in Barcelona. And he knows exactly how it feels when the beautiful game, which should be the absolute center of your universe, suddenly starts feeling like a crushing physical burden. He has a unique connection with Diego Simeone, a deeper bond than any greedy agent, Barca manager, or corporate representative could ever hope to build. Lionel Messi and Diego Simeone share a deep history that Argentine football knows inside out. They are definitely not close friends in the traditional sense, but they share a profound mutual respect that goes far beyond the typical professional courtesy of two men who once shared the Argentine national team dressing room. Simeone was already the legendary captain of the national side back when Messi was just a quiet, fragile teenager starting out in Barcelona, just beginning to show his genius to the global football elite. Right from the start, Simeone treated young Leo with the immense respect reserved only for the truly extraordinary. That underlying respect never truly faded. As the years rolled slowly by, Messi became exactly what Simeone always knew he would, the greatest player in the history of the game. And even as the fierce Atletico Madrid manager faced Messi in countless brutal, high-stakes domestic battles, he never once lost that deep, quiet respect born during those early national team days. Julián Álvarez, who now shares a tense dressing room with Simeone, knows this truth. He knows exactly how Simeone's voice changes whenever the name of the man from Rosario comes up in quiet conversations, speaking with the reverence of someone who believes what Messi represents to Argentine and global football completely transcends any petty, everyday sporting rivalries on the pitch. So, when a desperate Julian picked up his phone this week and dialed Messi's number, he did it with the absolute certainty that if there was one single person on earth capable of reaching Simeone, in a way no agent, no Barca director, and no smooth-talking representative ever could, that person was Leo Messi. That crucial phone call happened just hours ago. Julian, who had been carrying a crushing mental weight that even his therapist was struggling to help him manage, spoke to Messi with the raw, desperate honesty of a man who feels he has absolutely nothing left to lose. Laying bare everything he was going through. He confessed everything. The cold tension with Simeone, the transfer blockade by Atletico, and how Barca was still lingering, but remained paralyzed by a looming UEFA investigation and a rapidly closing transfer window, the grueling therapy sessions, and those miserable days in Valdebebas, where the toxic tension was so thick you could touch it. He felt trapped in an absolute nightmare where none of the powerful people supposed to be fixing his future were actually doing a single thing about it. Messi, listening to all of this in heavy, dead silence, took a few long seconds before replying. As he listened to Julian pour his heart out, he was already looking far beyond just comforting a struggling young international teammate. He was quietly formulating a wild solution, an escape route that neither Julian nor anyone in European football had even considered until that exact moment. Inter Miami desperately needs a clinical striker, a reality Messi knows far better than anyone. He knows their poor results over the last few weeks have one very specific cause. When the ball finally reaches the penalty box, someone has to be right there to finish the job. Messi has spent years creating pure magic for everyone else, and now he desperately needs a clinical finisher who can instinctively convert those chances into goals. With that exact same effortless chemistry he and Julian shared while tearing things up for the Argentine national team. Julian is exactly that man, and Messi, who is a powerful co-owner of Inter Miami and can easily make these executive decisions without consulting a single soul, already had a feeling Julian would eventually call. What he could not have predicted, however, was that Julian would reach out at this absolute breaking point, triggering a massive sequence of events that was about to completely send giant shockwaves through the entire global footballing world over the next few hours. Messi quietly proposed something to Julian that, in that dark moment, sounded like the most incredibly unrealistic option on earth, that he should come directly to Miami. This was absolutely not a light-hearted joke, nor was it just a nice, superficial gesture to comfort a struggling young friend. It was a concrete, dead serious professional proposal, complete with actual names, with real financial numbers, delivered with the gravity of someone who had calculated everything beforehand. Knowing this transfer made perfect sense far beyond just helping out a teammate. Julian, who had been completely obsessed with Barca for weeks, building all his dreams around walking out at the Camp Nou, and who had even triggered a major crisis at Atletico Madrid just to force that move, listened to Messi's words in stunned silence. It took him several long seconds to process the gravity of it. Barca was no longer his only escape route. There was another door, an exit route nobody had even imagined, and yet, amid the chaos of his current situation, it carried a sudden, undeniable logic that Julian began to see with surprising clarity, playing alongside Messi again. Not at Barca, where Messi was long gone, but in Miami, where Messi was still dominating, and where the dream of sharing the pitch with the greatest player in history was no longer a fantasy, but a concrete, life-altering reality laid directly on the toll during that call. Julian, having experienced the magic of playing alongside Messi in the national team, knows exactly what that looks like on the pitch. He knows the passes find you in ways no other player can ever replicate, and those telepathic combinations that usually require months of grueling training with other teammates just happens instantly and naturally with Messi from the very first minute. When Messi has the ball and you enter the box, you know he is going to find you, not because of endless tactical rehearsals, but through pure, unadulterated instinct. Because Messi always somehow finds the exact player he needs to find. Julian converts those clinical passes every single time, and his incredible numbers playing alongside Messi are the absolute proof of what this partnership can produce. Pure goals and massive moments. Messi insisted that only Julian could have finished it, because only Julian has that rare instinct to be in the exact right spot at the right time. So, this offer was never just some casual gesture of friendship. It was a cold sporting decision, one that Messi had full authority to make as co-owner of Inter Miami, believing it would be massively beneficial for both of them. Julian desperately needed to escape Atletico, but his highly anticipated path to Barca was completely blocked. Meanwhile, Inter Miami had gone weeks without finding the back of the net, struggling for the goals they needed to reverse the slump that had Messi seriously contemplating retirement. And Julian, listening to all of this on the phone, with his mind still completely clouded by weeks of intense stress and anxiety, he quickly answered a man who had waited far too long for someone to finally give him some clear direction. He said yes, if Messi could somehow resolve the mess with Atletico, he was ready to go to Miami. Then came the absolute most shocking twist in this whole drama. Messi calmly told him that he would handle Atletico personally, and that he was going to call Simeone himself. Julian, knowing the deep history between Messi and his manager, knew exactly what that phone call meant. Because a direct call from Messi to Simeone is never just a normal chat. Remember, Simeone coached Messi for years in the national setup and openly considers the Rosarino the greatest footballer he has ever witnessed. So he listens to Messi's voice differently than he does to anyone else in the entire sport. That conversation between Messi and Simeone was remarkably short. Messi, a man who never needs a lot of words to make his point, laid out the whole situation in just a couple of minutes, explaining that Julian was struggling deeply and that this deadlock was starting to hurt his mental health. He told him Inter Miami wanted the transfer, and that he was personally requesting it. Then Simeone gave an answer that absolutely nobody at Atletico ever expected. He simply said yes. He said that if Messi was the one asking, he was not about to stand in his way, admitting he would much rather see Julian thrive alongside Messi in Miami than watch him slowly drown in a toxic situation that helped absolutely nobody. And naturally, he far preferred that his absolute most important striker went off to play with the greatest player on the planet all the way across the Atlantic, rather than seeing him join Barca, a direct rival of Atletico competing in the very same league. That exact detail is massive because Simeone, who would never sell to Barca, found in Inter Miami a perfect escape route that solved his massive headache without creating a brand new one, ensuring Julian left but did not join a direct rival in Spain. Instead, He was heading to an entirely different continent and league to play with Messi, launching a story the football world has never witnessed. Julian Álvarez playing alongside Lionel Messi at Inter Miami. It is the exact deadly combination that the Argentine national team showcased to the globe for years, the very one that lifted the World Cup in Qatar. The exact partnership that still shone brightly in the 2026 World Cup, even though Spain ultimately won the trophy, now reunited on the pitch of Miami's brand new stadium before a passionate fan base that has spent years dreaming of watching something like this. Literally, nobody saw this coming. Not even Barca, who suddenly lost their absolute top transfer target overnight, and certainly not Atletico, who stumbled upon an exit route they would never have tolerated from any other team. Not even Julian himself, who just a week before this call still fully believed his immediate footballing future was at the Camp Nou. And during these last tense few hours, Inter Miami, having received the green light from Simeone and direct confirmation from Julian, began pulling the necessary strings behind the scenes to turn Messi's phone promise into a concrete official bid that Atletico de Madrid simply cannot turn down. There is one crucial detail that deserves to be explained about why Simeone made that decision. Because Simeone, who has spent years at Atletico de Madrid establishing an intense culture where loyalty and total commitment are the ultimate values, absolutely refused to yield to Barca. He did not bow to Madrid either, who also tried to sign Julian during the summer. He completely refused to break under any of the immense market pressure that had been building up around him for weeks. Yet, he gave in to Messi, and that really tells you everything about the massive aura Messi holds over those in Argentine football who know him intimately. When Messi personally asks you for something, there are certain people who simply cannot say no. It is not out of fear, but because the sheer weight of what Messi represents makes rejecting him almost impossible for anyone deeply connected to Argentine football. Simeone is definitely one of those people. Besides, there was another crucial factor Simeone calculated during that brief call, with the rapid instinct of a manager who has made high-pressure decisions for decades. He realized that a deeply frustrated Julian was no longer the player that the club needed, knowing that a footballer in therapy sessions just to cope with the mental strain of showing up to train every single day is simply never going to perform at the elite level Atletico desperately demands of him. Ultimately, the crushing mental block Julian was carrying did far more damage to the squad than his complete absence ever would. 80 million euros, that is the opening bid Inter Miami is currently preparing for Julian Álvarez. It is a figure well below the 150 million Atletico demanded from Barca, but it possesses something the offer from Barca never had. That cash is very real, and Inter Miami faces zero financial fair play investigations. It means David Beckham, who proudly co-owns this MLS club alongside Lionel Messi, has the raw financial power to make that offer, completely independent of player sales or future income. Then there are the variables. If Julian Álvarez becomes the MLS top scorer with Inter Miami, the final transfer package could easily climb to 100 million. And if the team lifts a trophy during his tenure, that payout surges. It is a contract cleverly engineered so Atletico, who essentially lost their star player because of a deadlock they could not resolve, can at least save face financially. Julian, fully aware of these behind-the-scenes moves, suddenly has an opportunity he could only dream of 48 hours ago. A completely clear and unblocked path forward, free from club directors who drag out negotiations for endless weeks without ever making progress, and far from the astounding tension of driving to Valdeba's training ground every morning, feeling completely trapped. Instead, he gets Miami alongside Messi, with the clear perspective that when his MLS adventure eventually wraps up, when Messi finally retires, and when American soccer has given Julian the goals and confidence required to conquer the absolute highest level, that dream move to Barca he desperately wanted this summer will still be waiting for him. And when that day comes, absolutely nobody will be able to block his arrival. In these final hours, the footballing world is about to receive a shockwave that absolutely nobody anticipated when this transfer window first opened. It proves that in this sport, much like in life, the absolute best resolutions usually emerge from the most unexpected places. Inter Miami will change completely this week, not because of a match result, and certainly not from a standard training session, but through a monumental transfer that nobody saw coming, when the summer window first opened. A deal that will dominate global football headlines within the next few hours. Julian Álvarez is heading to Inter Miami. To truly grasp what this represents, you have to dissect what Inter Miami has built up to this point, and exactly what they can become with this historic new addition. Beckham built Inter Miami with a vision stretching far beyond simple MLS results. He wanted to import genuine and elite-level football to the United States in a spectacular fashion that no other American franchise had ever pulled off. Securing Lionel Messi was obviously the most critical milestone of this entire project, instantly transforming Inter Miami from just another generic MLS franchise into the most intensely followed sports team on the planet in the crazy months following that announcement. But even Messi needs real partners on the pitch, not just average players, the kind of teammate who makes Messi even more Messi. The kind of player who, when Leo gets the ball and looks up, is already making the run, knowing exactly what magic is about to unfold, and standing in the perfect position to sweep it into the back of the net. Luis Suarez played that role beautifully during those opening months. Others arrived later, but none possessed that rare blend of world-class quality, clinical instinct, and telepathic understanding with Messi that Julian Álvarez displayed for the Argentine national team. The raw statistics speak for themselves. In every international fixture where Julian and Messi shared the pitch for Argentina, Messi scored or assisted in 63% of those matches, a truly mind-blowing statistic at this level of professional football. This reveals a deep connection going far beyond simple chance. It is not luck. It is simply that Julian reads Messi on the field in a way very few players on earth can replicate. He knows when to drift wide, when to hold his run, and exactly when the pass is coming, even before it has actually been played. From the foot of Leo Messi, that supreme tactical intelligence that Diego Simeone and Atletico Madrid tried to exploit in completely different setups. In Miami, Julian will step into a completely different environment, one where Messi no longer has to carry the heavy burden of the attack entirely on his own. A place where a lethal partner stands constantly ready to finish whatever magic Messi creates. Barca, which lost its primary summer transfer target this week in the most jaw-dropping manner imaginable, suddenly faces a massive crisis they never saw for two. The player who was supposed to solve all their problems at the center of the attack is no longer available. The elite striker whom sporting director Deco went to scout personally, the finisher Flick desperately needed to complete his front line, and whom Laporta had identified as the single most critical signing of the entire summer, is instead going to play in Miami with Messi. There is another incredibly bitter pill that Barca must swallow very soon. The actual reason why Julian Álvarez rejected Barca had absolutely nothing to do with the sporting project, the high price tag, UEFA investigations, or complex financial fair play restrictions. It was Messi, whose single 30-minute phone call accomplished what sporting director Deco failed to achieve over months of tedious negotiations. The most respected figure in global football made a request, and Simeone granted it. Julian, who had his mind completely set on joining Barca, changed everything in one brief conversation, because Messi offered him the one thing Barca never could, the chance to play right alongside him. There is also one final, deeply emotional dimension of this transfer story that the footballing world must understand before things are made official. What this truly means for Messi. Because Messi was reportedly considering retirement this week, and even missed a crucial penalty, who suffered back-to-back defeats, and even published a vulnerable letter confessing his deepest doubts about whether to continue playing, has handled this entire situation with the sheer genius he always possessed on the pitch. He transformed a massive problem into a perfect solution. His main issue was Inter Miami completely lacking goals, and his direct solution was Julian. At the same time, he quietly resolved the misery of his international teammate, who had spent weeks suffocating under massive pressure at Atletico. Two major problems, one quick phone call, one simple solution. That is exactly what Messi did this week from Miami. While the entire football world was busy debating his retirement, he was doing anything but retiring. He actually signed Julian Álvarez. And once that news is officially announced over the next few hours, every football fan whose mind has been glued to the European transfer market for weeks will suddenly spin their head toward Miami. They will understand that the biggest story of this summer did not happen at the Bernabeu, nor at Camp Nou, nor at the Allianz Arena. It actually happened in a personal phone call between two Argentines who have known each other for years and who, when things get complicated, always find a way to solve them together, just as they always did out on the pitch. There is something that European football will take days to fully process the moment this massive news becomes official. That the single best striker on the market this summer, the one Barco desperately wanted, the one Madrid tried to sign for 150 million, the very player whom Simeone considered completely untransferable, that elite striker is actually going to play in Miami. Not in the Champions League, but in the MLS. And in the rigid context of European football, where the MLS is still dismissed as a retirement home for players finishing their careers early, this is going to trigger a massive debate that absolutely nobody expected to have this week. Is this truly a step back in Julian Álvarez's career? The honest answer is that it simply depends on how you look at it. From the strict perspective of European football, yes, it is. Julian, who is 27 years old and currently in the absolute prime of his career, is leaving to play in a league that simply does not have the fierce competitive level of the domestic league or the Champions League. But when you look at what Julian was actually going through at Atletico, the answer becomes completely different. A highly stressed player in psychological therapy due to the intense pressure of his contractual dispute is simply not in any condition to meet the demands that elite European football constantly requires. A professional athlete's mental health is just as critical as his physical condition, and that in this specific case, the only possible way to recover the best version of Julian was to rescue him from a situation that was slowly consuming him. Miami offers him exactly that reset. A peaceful place where Julian can truly enjoy playing football again, free from the heavy pressure of blocked transfer negotiations, and away from the awkward glare of a manager who clearly feels uncomfortable, having a frustrated player in his squad who desperately wanted to escape. With Messi standing right by his side, alongside Suarez, who is already settled on the team, and keeping in mind the exciting perspective that when this comforting chapter in Miami finally comes to an end, the same Barco that desperately wanted him this summer will still be waiting. Whether they score goals or not, and whether Deco is there or gone, Barco will always crave a forward with the precise qualities of Julian Álvarez. And Julian, after completely recovering his best form playing next to Messi, will eventually arrive in Barcelona with one crucial thing he lacked this summer: the absolute certainty that his bold decision was entirely correct. And Simeone, who will have to explain to his loyal fans in the coming hours why he let Julian Álvarez go to Miami after refusing for weeks to sell him to Barco, has a simple answer that the mattress fans will understand perfectly. That absolutely nobody has the magnetic pull of Lionel Messi, and when Messi personally calls you, some things are simply done without needing any further explanation. The entire world of football, which was completely obsessed this week with whether Mbappe followed Mourinho's rules, whether Diamond was actually 19 or 27 years old, and whether Rodri or Vinícius lost their major titles. That same world of football now has a massive new headline: the single most unexpected drama of the summer, Julian Álvarez, Inter Miami, and Messi. One call that changed everything.